So welcome. Thank you for joining me for today's brush up on paying for college. This is a webinar, so it's a little different than a VPD, which I'll talk about in just a second, but you can kind of kick back and relax with these webinars more so than you do with a VPD. But the chat, like I said, I'll kind of keep my eye on that, but that's definitely a way for you to communicate with the other teachers in this group. And I'll speak to that in just a moment. So this is on paying for college, brushing up on paying for college, because we're not going to fit everything about financial aid into 1 hour. It's just impossible to do. But NGPF recently just updated the paying for college unit. So my goal is to give you a quick brush up on paying for college on some of the basics, but highlight some of the awesome activities, and particularly some that we have updated recently in our curriculum. So if I haven't met you before, my name's Amanda Volz. I am a part of the NGPF team, kind of newish since this summer. But where I come from is I'm a teacher. So I have taught personal finance for 18 years, and I have taken a 1-year leave of absence from the classroom, and I'm working for NGPF full-time this year. So I hope to see you in certification courses, because I run the Paying for College cert course, and also I'm doing some VPDs and working on curriculum. But if you ever need anything, my email's here. It's amanda@ngpf.org, but I'm kind of the token paying for college girl on the team in running the cert course, and a lot of PDs on paying for college, and also tech tools and things like that. So that's who I am. Today's session is not a virtual PD. So if this is your first webinar, webinars are a little bit different in that it's a lot of me, it's a lot of Amanda, it's a lot of direct instruction, it's a lot of me talking at you, showing my presentation and some tools and some information. So it's totally cool, and I see a lot of you doing that right now. It's totally cool to turn off your camera, or you can leave it on, whatever you're more comfortable with. You will stay muted throughout the webinar, because like I said, it's more of a presenting information to you. You're welcome to use the chat for any questions or like extra commentary or resource share or any of that. I'm just not going to be monitoring the chat. I mean, I'll try to as heavily. So like Varun just said, see, I can still see it, but I'm more presenting to you. There's no Nearpod, it's a sit and get. Yep, it's a sit and get some information from Amanda. So you can turn your camera off, you can cook dinner, you can listen all at the same time. I have a few interactive elements that I've placed in here. And then I will answer any questions at the end of the webinar. But you're welcome to use the chat to get some. There's a lot of you that know a lot about paying for college and financial aid, so you can get peer answered questions in the chat. So here's how I designed this 1-hour webinar about paying for college, because it's a lot of information. I mean, I teach the 9-hour certification course on paying for college, and I feel like that's not even enough time to talk about financial aid and paying for college. So to cram all the important things in 1 hour, here's my mindset. Here's how I designed it. What I'm going to do over the next 55 minutes or so is I'm going to take you through the timeline of financial aid. And for every piece of the timeline, I'm going to do a quick brush up on, I guess, what I would consider to be important information in each area. I'll give some current events that are happening, and then I'll point out to you as a teacher and as I've been working through the curriculum with the NGPF team, what are some of the great resources that you can use with your students. So that's kind of how I plan this out, is chunking it out through a timeline, kind of a brush up, and then what's going on now in the world, because the financial aid world and the paying for college and the college admissions and all of that is changing rapidly due to this pandemic. And then I'll highlight some resources as we go through. So the first stage I want to look at in the paying for college process is the preparation stage. And what I use to teach my students, and I'm not sure how well you can see this on your screen, but this infographic comes right from the NGPF curriculum. So here's another thing to tell you. At the end of this webinar, today, tomorrow morning, around, probably more tomorrow, you will get a follow-up email, and it will have this slide deck in it. And as I designed the slide deck, I've linked everything. So for example, this infographic right here, if you're like, oh, I'd like to use that with my students, if you just click on it, it'll take you to the infographic. So I've linked everything for you when you get this slide deck, which will likely be tomorrow. So in this infographic, honestly, I should tell you a little about me, just so you know when I say when I teach this. I told you I've taught for 18 years, and I teach a year-long personal finance class to 12th graders. So we definitely talk about paying for college in my class. And as I talk about paying for college in the financial aid process, I use this infographic as my guide. So I used it as the guide for today's webinar also. So we're in that first, I kind of blew it up and moved it over. We're in that first stage, which is the preparation stage. The stage of going to college where you're looking at some of the expenses, you're deciding what college you want to go to, you're looking and investigating all different universities, and like it says here, you're looking at the financial aid process and starting to save and begin the whole process of thinking about funding college and researching colleges. College is expensive, which is no surprise. So what you're seeing in front of you is from about 1989 until 2020, all you're looking at is the average published tuition and fees. So this is not all college expenses. It's not all those indirect and direct expenses. It's just looking at tuition and fees for private four-year colleges, that's the top line, the public four-year college, and then the public two-year college. And as you see, and again, I linked you to this source if you wanted to use it in your classroom. But as you see, and again, no surprise, it's just progressively gotten more and more expensive. That if you look at that dark blue line, in about 1990, the average cost for a tuition and fees for a four-year public university was about $3,500. Comparing that to today's price, again, just looking at tuition and fees, it's a little over $10,000. And then as a recent article that I just read, this comes from US News, which again, it's everything is linked. And what you're looking at is for the first time in 10 years that US News has tracked all of this data, the average total debt of graduates who took out loans, so these are indebted graduates, has surpassed $30,000. So we're just over that $30,000 mark. And this was just a recent article from US News in which we're seeing the debt loads also increasing, which again is not a big surprise, but also just kind of puts some of this conversation into perspective. So a cool tool that I want to share with you, and some of you may already use this in your classrooms, is College Scorecard. Do any of you use College Scorecard already with your students? Some nods. I know I can't see all of your faces right now, but College Scorecard is a great tool for the investigation process, the trying to find the right fit, like it says right there, trying to look at different universities. And on this website, so again, if I just click on it, it allows you as a student to search for universities by name. It allows you to do a custom search, or there's a show me options where you can find schools near you and things like that. So I'm from Michigan, by the way. I don't know if I said that already, but if I searched Michigan State University on College Scorecard, here's some of the data that you will get from this website. So it shows you some of the graduation information, like graduation rates. I can look at average annual cost of that particular university. And then there's a ton of data that, remember, we're in that preparation phase. So that phase of investigating and searching colleges and looking at different costs. And this is a great tool, I think, to use for real life, and also with the classroom, in the classroom, for students to investigate some different colleges. But you can also break down different costs. You can break down graduation rates, financial aid. So I can go and look at financial aid information and the percentage of students at that university that are receiving federal loans, approximate loan payments. There's just a ton of data in this website that just allowing students to peruse it and helping them in that preparation phase of looking at statistics and important information for different universities. So again, I linked that in this slide deck in which you'll get a copy of. The important thing, I think, in that preparation phase is knowing the difference between two common terms. So knowing the difference between the sticker price as students are preparing and investigating, and in that first phase of this timeline, knowing the difference between the sticker price and the net price of a college is really important. So sticker price is the published cost. So if I went on MSU's website and looked up the cost to go to Michigan State University, that published price is the sticker price. But that's not the price that everyone pays to go to Michigan State University. So what needs to be subtracted from that is any what's called gift aid. Gift aid does not include loans because you have to pay back loans, but gift aid would be any free money that you don't have to pay back. For example, grants and scholarships. And when you subtract that gift aid out, that's the true cost of college, which is also called the net price. So the published price on the web is the sticker price, the cost of attendance. But that's not what everybody pays. So the net price is something in like the beginning investigation process of just knowing the difference between these is taking out that gift aid. By law, by federal law, every university has to have a net price calculator on its website. So if I go to Michigan State University or go to U of M or go to any of these colleges, all of them will have a net price calculator on their website where me and my family and my parents and whatever can input some basic financial information and I can get an approximate net price to attend that university. So as far as some classroom integration, here's two great activities from NGPF in looking at those beginning phases, that preparation phase, looking at some of the expenses. The first one is called How Much Will Your College Actually Cost? And it's an activity that students use a website called Tuition Tracker. That's another cool tool, kind of like College Scorecard, but this one looks at sticker price, and then it looks at net price based on different income levels. So in this activity, it was just updated in our little unit revamp update. Students will look at 5 different colleges. They'll use that Tuition Tracker website and they'll be able, I like that activity. It's a really eye-opening difference between sticker price and net price. The second activity I want to kind of shout out to you is a monthly college budget. So looking at not just, I know the graphic I showed you was just tuition and fees, but college is much more expensive than that. There's so many other costs. So looking at direct expenses, those charged by the university, and indirect expenses, those other expenses that you're gonna have, this second activity over here, the college budget, has students look at just a month, but I think you could make it into a semester or an academic year, and they look at those direct expenses and indirect expenses in that activity. This is also and some of you may have seen this as like as far as a current event or what's new and now, Sallie Mae every single year puts out this report, which is How America Pays for College. So just recently, maybe like a month or two, a couple months ago, they put out their new report. And this How America Pays for College, again, linked for you in the slide deck when you get it, just gives you some updated statistics on the paying for college process. Here's a couple that I found interesting, or I guess surprising. Here's the first one. So this is 2020. This is the newest report that they've put out. And this graph right here, personally, I found a little bit interesting. And what it's looking at is the share of college costs that are paid from different funding sources. So what we're seeing in 2020 in this data from this study from Sallie Mae is that we're seeing that 44% of funding is coming from parents' income and savings. I was surprised by it. Personally, I was surprised by that. I mean, you could add your own commentary in the chat if you'd like to. I thought this borrowing might have been a higher percentage, but that large of a percent is coming from parents' income and savings. The other surprising statistic from this report is this one down here. And it's FAFSA time. Some of you may be teaching FAFSA to your students, which is maybe why you're here. And we're going to talk about FAFSA next. But if you see in this report, fewer families are filing the FAFSA. So you see that the percentage has steadily decreased from 2 years ago. And the number one reason for families not filing the FAFSA is they believe they wouldn't qualify for any aid. So less families are filing the FAFSA. So we're going to actually talk about the FAFSA. That's kind of the stage 2. But this is an interesting report, pretty simplistic. This is the whole report right here as you see me scanning it, and I'll send it your way for you to look at some of those other statistics. So let's move into the second here. So the first one's all about like preparing, knowing just some basic vocabulary, looking at pricing, looking at different tools, investigating different colleges. The second, I guess, piece of the paying for college or the financial aid process is the FAFSA. So here's my financial aid process infographic. All I did, and I think this was a question in the chat, I just snipped it. I just snipped that second section out of there. And after that preparation phase, it's now time to apply for financial aid. So the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, is a way for a student to get federal aid, but also get state aid and institutional aid. So some money from their college as well. So that like key misconception of my parents make too much money, I won't qualify for anything, I don't want federal student loans. The FAFSA, although a federal form, is also used by the colleges and by states to get some of that money. So let's talk about, this is kind of the big part of it here, and talking about the FAFSA form, the second stage of the financial aid process. So the FAFSA, if you didn't know, launched on October 1st. So if you haven't told your students about FAFSA yet, important to tell them, because the most recent FAFSA, which is the 2021-2022 FAFSA. So what that means is any student who is going to college during that time frame and needs financial aid should fill out that FAFSA form. And it launched on October 1st. Some aid, as I just told you, federal, state, college, some of that aid, that free money, those grants are first come, first serve. So for the FAFSA, you want to jump on it. I say jump on it, but you want to fill it out as soon as you possibly can. And like I said, it just launched on October 1st. It used to be January, but in 2017, they shifted the date from the release date of January 1st to now the FAFSA always launches on October 1st. So when's the deadline? So it launched a couple days ago, October 1st. Well, as far as deadlines, there's actually 3 deadlines that should be on a student's radar. The first deadline is the federal deadline. So the federal deadline for the FAFSA is June 30th. To qualify for federal aid, like a Pell Grant or any type of federal aid, is going to be June 30th. But there's 2 other important deadlines that students should be aware of, and that's your state's deadline, because remember, FAFSA is not just for the federal aid. You might qualify for a state grant, or you might qualify for money from your institution, and so the state and the college both have deadlines. So some of you are, yeah, you're welcome to use the chat to share information as well as I'm kind of talking here. So federal deadline, June 30th. What's your state deadline? And then the college's deadline. So I will on this next slide, and I know you don't have access to it right here. Actually, I could probably put it in the chat for you if you wanted to check it out and look. Every state has a different deadline. Michigan's, because I'm in Michigan, Michigan's is March 1st. So what I'm showing you right now, and what I just put in the chat if you want, is if you scroll down on this website, you can put your own state in there. So I'll just put Texas in here. And I want it for the 2021-2022 FAFSA. And the deadline for Texas is January 15th. So every state has their own deadline, and the link that's on this presentation, and I just popped it in the chat too, if you wanted to look at what your state's is, you can find it on this website. As far as the question in the chat about juniors filling out the FAFSA, you only need to fill out the FAFSA. FAFSA would be every single year. It's filled out annually, so that's something I didn't mention, but you fill it out every year you need aid. So high school seniors who are going on to college the next year, they're going to need aid in that 2021-2022 school year. They would fill out the FAFSA. Even a college sophomore who's going to require financial aid, they would fill out the FAFSA form. So like I said, I popped it in the chat, and knowing the state deadline is important. College, you would have to research your college's deadline as well. So here's one of our questions of the day. So if question of the day is new to you, every day we put a question that you can use to maybe kickstart your class, or there's a whole library of them that you could use as a teaching tool in your classroom. And we put them on our blog every single day. Or if you have you're signed up to get an email of our blog, it'll be sent to your email every day. So here's a semi-recent question of the day about FAFSA. How much free financial aid is lost to families who don't file the FAFSA? If you want to participate, because this is a webinar, you can just sit back and listen and get all the information. If you want to put your guess in the chat, you can. How much financial aid total, grand total, do you think is lost to families who don't file the FAFSA? This is like a question of the day. If you want to wager your guess in the chat, you can. If you don't, you don't have to, but if you want to participate. So thanks, Rochelle, I see your answer. Okay, a couple of you are putting in here. So how much total financial aid is lost to families who don't file the FAFSA? Actually, this number is going to be shocking for some of you, and it was for me too. The answer is $2.6 billion with a B, billion dollars is missed. And this is from a NerdWallet article that did a FAFSA study. And each of our questions of the day will have a question like that, where you could start your class or start a unit. And then there's always a click here for more information, and it will take you to the article or the resource or a way to dig deeper. So there's a lot of money that's missed by parents and families who don't complete the FAFSA. And there's a lot of misconceptions. It's very complicated. I don't know how to do it. I don't know where to start. I won't qualify for any money. But remember, it's not just federal aid. It's not just loans. Loans are part of some of those packages, as we'll see today. But it's really important that if students feel that they need some financial aid, they should fill out the FAFSA. So there's also, by the way, with the question of the day, there's always some follow-up questions, which we're not going to do today, but you can see that they're listed, and that's it. So that's kind of like the questions of the day type of product that we have. So lots of information today. I hope I'm not going too fast and I'm being clear enough to give you the basics to follow this whole process. So when filling out the FAFSA, it's a free form. It's available on October 1st. You could fill it out online, which is what most people probably do, or you can still fill out paper version, PDF, and mail it in, or the FAFSA also has an app, so you can fill it out that way as well. When a student and family is filling out the FAFSA, there's going to be some questions that determine their dependency status. So I will show you, actually I think I linked it here. I'll show you those in a second, but they're gonna ask specific questions that are trying to determine if a student is a dependent or an independent. And you can dig real deep into this, but I'm just gonna give you some basic information because we're gonna reference this as I move through this webinar. So if a student qualifies as a dependent, what that means is they have to report their own, as the students, information on the FAFSA and their parents' information on the FAFSA, their parents' income and assets on the FAFSA. If a student qualifies as an independent, then they only put their own information on the FAFSA. So I'm just going to click on it to show you, but like I said, you could dig into this a bit, and I'll give you the link to dig into it when you get the slide deck. But here's kind of a quick, I like this little quick graphic, but what you see here is a list of 10 questions. And I don't know how small, I'm trying to gauge I can see a couple of your faces to see, hopefully you can see it on your screen. But these 10 questions, if a student answered yes to any of these questions, then they may qualify or be an independent student. So that means they would only report their own information on the FAFSA form. If they answered no to all of the questions, then they're considered a dependent student. And that's probably going to be, at least in teaching 12th grade students, most of them are classified as a dependent. So that means that they report their information and their parents on the FAFSA form. So that's kind of like broad overview, but we dig a little deeper into this in the certification course, and I'm offering a 1-hour PD just on FAFSA, which I'll tell you about here at the end, where we dig into more of the details of some of this. But on a general basis, just know that the FAFSA asks those questions to determine whether a student is a dependent or an independent. Independent means they also include their parents' information on the FAFSA form. So what do you need to fill out the FAFSA? Well, some simple information that you're gonna need. It takes about an hour to fill out the FAFSA form, but I think it takes about an hour if you have your stuff together. Like if you have your documents ready to go and you have your username and password, then it takes about an hour to fill out. So one thing that a student's going to need is they're going to need what's called an FSA ID. So that's essentially their username and password. And if they're a dependent student, as we just defined, then the parent and the student each need an FSA ID. They're going to need social security number. They're going to need tax information. Now here's something interesting, and you might already know this about the FAFSA. FAFSA is available October 1st. So that means because it's available in October, you are always going to need prior tax year's information. Prior. If you just remember prior, then you're always going to need 2 years before. So for example, for this year's FAFSA, the one that just became live for 2021, 2022, you're going to need 2019 tax information. And if you complete the FAFSA online, which is what a majority, I think, of people do statistically, they fill it out online, then there's a retrieval tool that just automatically pulls your tax information. It's called the IRS DRT, data retrieval tool, where it'll just automatically pull that tax information. So FAFSA now requires, since in the last few years, prior tax information. To fill out the FAFSA, you'll also need records of any untaxed income, any assets, and assets, remember, if you're a dependent, so it would be your assets like savings accounts, things of that nature, as well as parents' assets if you're a dependent. And then what are the schools that you want your information sent to? So if you're filling out the online FAFSA, then you have 10 spots. You can put 10 different colleges on the FAFSA form, on the online version. On the paper version of the FAFSA, there's only room for 4. So that's just a difference between the two, I guess. And then what happens is all of the information from your FAFSA is just sent to those colleges and universities, and then they will create your offer letter, which we'll talk about here in a moment. So that's kind of the main stuff, documents, information, things that you're going to need to fill out the FAFSA form. I think the key things are that FSA ID, as a dependent, you need student and parent need one, and that you need prior tax information for the FAFSA. So with COVID and this current pandemic and everything that comes along with it, what if, as far as like a current event here, what if your financial situation has changed? Because FAFSA is available October 1st, and I have to put in my prior tax information, and that's not what it is anymore. My mom has lost her job, things are different. So what if your financial situation changes, which is going to be likely, or I shouldn't say that, it's going to be, for a lot of families, different than it was 2 years ago. So what do you do? Well, just recently, I don't know if any of you have used it and saw it, but we had a FinCap Friday all about FAFSA. So FinCap Fridays are every Friday. This comes out on our website, a new one does, and it's all related to current events. So FinCap Friday, if you haven't used that product, my students loved it. Every Friday we would do it. Sometimes I just cross out Friday and we'd do it on Tuesday or whatever. We do it on different days, but it takes a current event. It asks some questions. There's a little explainer video, and then there's some ways to learn more. So with this is going to kind of answer the question of, well, what if my situation is not the same? My financial situation is not the same as it was in the prior tax year. Well, let's look at it here on what you do. So here's my first question. If you want to participate, you can add your answers in the chat. So here's my first question for FinCap Friday, FAFSA in the fall. Current and prospective college students can complete the FAFSA starting on, what's the answer? A, B, C, or D? You can put your answer in the chat if you want to participate. You don't have to. And most of you are correct. FAFSA starts on October 1st. So remember, FAFSA is available on October 1st. Thanks for participating, everybody. This is a webinar, which I know is just like a sit and get kind of thing. Number 2. For the 2021-2022 school year, how much money is available in federal student aid, which includes grants, loans, and work study? What's your guess? $1 billion, $10 billion, 50, or 150 billion? I'm just letting you guess. And remember, I'm using a dual screen, so it looks kind of like I'm looking up. So the answer is actually D. There's $150 billion available in federal student aid. Number 3, through 4/15 of 20, the total number of FAFSA applications submitted by students already enrolled in college, do you think it's decreased, increased, or remained the same? So the number of FAFSA applications through 4/15 of 20, what do you think it's done? Yeah, thanks for participating in the chat, everybody. It's decreased, which most of the data that I've presented to you so far has said that. Number 4, to complete the FAFSA for the 2021-2022 school year, you're going to need tax information from, we just said it, let's see, you all got it. Yeah, you all got it down good. 2019, prior tax year. And then here's the last question. And again, all our FinCap Fridays do the same thing. I'm using the no tech version. Some of them you can do, they're embedded in Kahoot. So if you like Kahoot, you could do that. I'm using the no tech one, which is just quick. What should a student do if their financial aid package doesn't accurately reflect their current situation? So kind of going back to the question I asked, where my financial situation is not the same. So there's nothing they can do. Should they do the FAFSA again? Contact principal or dean, or what you're all getting correct, and that's file an appeal with their financial aid office. I'm going to talk more about that in just a second. So every FinCap Friday has a quick little video. We're going to try and stream this, and let me know in the chat if it's real glitchy, but otherwise I'm going to let you watch this because it's going to help answer the question I just asked.
I'm Yaneli, also known as Miss Be Helpful, with another FinCap Friday brought to you by NGPF. The free application for federal student aid, also known as the FAFSA, is what every college student and prospective college student needs to submit in order to unlock financial aid. FAFSA opens on October 1st each year and usually leads to some free money from grants and scholarships, but it could also mean debt in the form of student loans. For the 2021 and 2022 school year, the federal government budgeted $150 billion for financial aid. But FAFSA is not just about getting money from the federal government's budget. It also includes state budgets and college budgets too. COVID-19 threw a wrench in a lot of people's college plans. So the number of FAFSA applications that were submitted as of April 2020 decreased. But even if your college plans are up in the air, you still want to submit that FAFSA ASAP because financial aid is awarded on a first come, first served basis. And you want to be first in line for financial aid if you do decide to attend college. It's more important than ever to apply early because many students and their families have been affected by the pandemic, suffering job loss, medical bills, or even the loss of loved ones. When completing FAFSA for a specific school year, you must use tax information from 2 years prior to that school year. And that's what determines your expected family contribution or your EFC. That's how much money it's going to cost you out of pocket to attend college. But tax returns filed from 2 years ago might not accurately reflect your financial picture today. So what should you do if your financial aid package doesn't accurately reflect your current situation? Well, don't be discouraged. You should be prepared to file an appeal with the financial aid office at your college. This process can actually lead to an updated financial aid offer.
So I see lots of you kind of chatting in the chat. Miss Be Helpful. Miss Be Helpful was Miss Be Helpful before she came to NGPF, like somebody said. She does a lot of YouTube stuff. Yaneli does. And actually in this FinCap Friday, if you go find it on our website, she will come visit your class. So she will come and do like a little Zoom meeting if you're interested in it. And I see some of you adding some of that into the chat. So with the FinCap Friday, there's like a discussion prompt that's added, and then there's some resources and references always with every FinCap Friday episode or that we put out every single week. So as Yaneli just said in the video, and a lot of you answered the question correctly, what if your financial situation has changed? So students, and I linked you to another article here in this slide deck that will be sent to you, but students still put or use the required tax information in the FAFSA, but then should immediately be contacting the financial aid office to let them know of their financial situation. And once they get their offer letter, which is going to be one of the segments here in our timeline or in our infographic, once they get that offer letter, they can appeal it. So they will request something in the financial aid world that's known as professional judgment. And that means they might have to submit some paperwork to them, but it will give them a more accurate picture of what's going on now in their financial life to then maybe alter that financial aid package that they're getting. So this is common. There's a lot of articles out there. I'm reading a lot on paying for college, and a lot of it is that the financial situation has changed. So what do you do next? Contact the financial aid office, and you can appeal that financial aid offer letter, which we'll get to in just a few minutes here. So now that you've done the FAFSA, and again, we could dig into more details on the FAFSA, but that's kind of general overview of that FAFSA form. Now what? What happens after you fill out the FAFSA form? Well, the next step in this is that a student is going to receive what's called a SAR, a student aid report, and it's kind of like a receipt, essentially, of what you've put in on the FAFSA, the answers you gave or the information that you gave. But there's two other important pieces of data on the student aid report, and that's a student's EFC, expected family contribution, which we didn't dig into too in depth in this webinar, but is important to know that expected family contribution. And also another four-digit number that's called lots of acronyms, a DRN, a data release number, which is like if you had to call your university about your FAFSA form, it's that reference number. So that would be what comes next, about 3 days to 3 weeks, depending on if you do it online or on paper, of completing the FAFSA form. That's the next thing that happens, is the student aid report. And I will tell you that we have an activity online in which students analyze a SAR, a student aid report, and I'm in the process of updating it right now. So it's gonna, I know that SAR, if you use it with your students, it's a little outdated, and I'm working on that one to give you an updated version, because I know how students are. When they see, what, this is from 2012, they kind of disregard. So I'm updating it, and it'll be probably within like the next week, that activity will be updated for you to use, for them to be able to look and see what that student aid report looks like. All right, moving, well, how am I doing on time? We still have about 20 minutes. So moving to like the next piece of this financial aid process. So we did preparation, like I looked at college scorecard, sticker and net price. Every university has a net price calculator. Look at some of those costs in preparing. FAFSA was the next chunk in getting access to different types of aid, federal aid, state aid, and institutional aid. Filling out that federal form is really the like cornerstone of the financial aid process. The next, I guess, in this timeline is now we're looking at that students receive what used to be called an award letter, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, but now more commonly called an offer, a financial aid offer, listing all the different types of aid that they may qualify for in terms of grants, potentially loans, and then work study and scholarships from the university on that award letter or that offer letter. So after they've completed the FAFSA, they've designated the colleges. Remember, they can put 10 colleges on the online FAFSA form, and their information will be sent to those colleges. And once a student is accepted to that university, they'll then get what's called an offer letter or a financial aid offer with all of the aid options that school, along with any federal aid options that they're offering or potentially going to receive. So is it still called an award letter? Technically, no. So about a year ago or so, the Department of Education is encouraging schools to get rid of the term award letter, which my personal opinion, I like, because we all know, or as you're teaching this, those offer letters also include loans. So some of them will be free money as far as grants and scholarships, but some of the aid that a student may be receiving is also loans. So it's not always an award because those loans have to be paid back. So about a year ago, the language has changed to get rid of to avoid using the word award and using the word letter, but just calling it a financial aid offer. And you can see that there's some other things. I just honestly have snipped this right from the website, and I think I linked it here, which will take you to the actual like information that avoid listing plus loans, avoid issuing a financial aid offer that doesn't have the cost of attendance on it. So you can see that there's been not requirements, but some encouragement to use some of the same format and some of the same vocabulary. So it used to be called an award letter. It's now more commonly being used, called a financial aid offer. And something to know about the financial aid offers is that there's no standard format. So for a lot of families and a lot of students, this can be a very confusing piece of paper because it uses a lot of terminology they might not be familiar with, and every university sets it up a little bit differently. I'll show you an example of these in just a moment. So about March, April, if you're not talking about like early decision or any of that, if you're just sticking to a standard financial aid timeline, October is when FAFSA comes out. And then about March, April, students will start to receive these financial aid offers. And on that offer is going to be all of the financial aid options that they qualify for or that school is offering to them. So the school uses the information from that FAFSA to create the offer. And I think, and this is again kind of my opinion in teaching this with 12th graders, that like second bullet, that like piece of information is often, students don't realize that they think that when they're filling out the FAFSA, it's only for federal aid. And that information is actually passed on to the college to then qualify them for some of the institutional aid as well. And another, I guess, just key thing before I click move on here is there's no standard format. So learning the loans versus the grants and how seeing different examples of these, I think can be very helpful. So the order in which students want to accept aid is take the free money first, right? They want to take all of the free money first and then accept federal loans over private loans. And we're not digging too deep into this in this particular webinar, because again, all I'm doing is brushing a little top layer. But in the Paying for College certification course and in some of the PDs I do, we dig deeper into all these different types of aid. But we always want to accept free money first as far as grants and scholarships. Work study would maybe be second. Work study is not technically gift aid because a student has to work to earn the money, but it's self-help aid, I think is what it's categorized as. And then always choosing federal loans over private because federal loans often have lower interest rates and more flexible repayment plans. So I actually would like to show you a quick video from 2 cents. And hoping, how was the other video? Did it come across okay for the few of you I can see? Okay, so I like 2 cents. I don't know if any of you do and like their videos, but I think they're like a little cheesy, but they get all the good points across, so I like them. So this is about a 5-6 minute video, and what it's going to do is it's going to explain all those areas of financial aid and talking about the process, and I think it's a great one you can use with your students, but instead of me talking about grants, loans, scholarships, all of that, the video will do that for you. So I'm going to play this for you. It's about, like I said, about a 5 or 6 minute video, and you tell me in the chat if it ends up being glitchy as far as Wi-Fi.
When I was 18 years old, everything I knew about paying for college could have fit on the postage stamp that came on my acceptance letter.
Going to college can be a gold mine. The average college graduate makes about $1 million more over their lifetime than someone without a degree. But the overall profitability of your degree depends greatly on how you pay for it. The path to hitting the mother lode can be strewn with twists, turns, and dead ends.
But if you're willing to put in the work, there's actually a lot of gold in them thar hills.
70% of college students don't have their education costs fully covered by family. So prospecting for financial aid is a new student's most important first step. But where to begin? With the ultimate financial aid treasure map, the free application for student aid, or FAFSA. It's 108 questions that dig into your personal and financial history. It's your best shot for obtaining the most amount of free or low-cost college aid out there. Surprisingly, only 61% of high school students are filling it out.
Yes, it might look intimidating at first, but most people report that completing the entire form only takes about an hour. It can be sent to 10 schools at once, and you can do it before you even apply to college. There's even a handy website that lists common mistakes to avoid when completing the FAFSA. And hey, now that you're a legal adult, you may as well get used to filling out tedious forms.
Each school will send you an award letter with different offers. You'll need to sift through the sediment to find what treasure may lie beneath the surface. The real pay dirt you're hoping for is free money. aka grants and scholarships. These might come from the federal government, the state, or the school itself. The amount you're offered can be need-based or merit-based, so having a low family income or high grades will help your chances. But contrary to popular belief, there is no income cutoff when it comes to aid, so don't let that stop you from prospecting.
Over 13 million students receive financial aid every year. So how can you get a leg up in this gold rush? First, file early. Gift aid is first come, first served. If you wait too long to stake a claim, you could find the vein has been bled dry. FAFSA forms become available the 1st of October, and you'll have to redo it every year. So put an ongoing reminder in your calendar.
If you're still a dependent, most of the FAFSA information will be based on your parents' finances. If you happen to go back and forth between guardians' households, spending more time with the lower earning parent could make you eligible for more needs-based aid. Or if one parent has children already in college, claiming them as the custodial parent could also end up putting more money in your pocket.
And finally, you can appeal the letter if you don't love the outcome. Try calling their financial aid department and explaining your situation. You can even show them award letters for colleges that are offering you more. You might have more leverage than you think.
Your award letter will let you know whether you're eligible to take part in a work-study program. In 2019, only 14% of students took advantage of jobs offered through their university. You'll probably only make a few $1,000s during the academic year, but the perks can be sweet. Working on campus, you won't have to commute. Your hours are always scheduled around your classes, and some even allow you to do homework on the job. Most importantly, you could get a head start on your career by getting work experience in your chosen field while you're still in school.
Now, I know the idea of cobbling together a free ride is super appealing, but it might be time for a little reality check. According to a study done back in 2016, only 18.8% of undergraduate students received enough gift aid to cover half the cost of attendance. So unless you can make up the difference with savings or working a ton, you might have to prepare yourself to join the 70% of your fellow graduates in taking on some student loans. And it's important to learn that not all of them are created equal.
Federal student loans typically have the most favorable terms, and, depending on your FAFSA, can even be subsidized, which means the government actually pays the interest while you're in school, and sometimes even afterwards.
Even unsubsidized federal student loans have advantages. You don't have to pay while you're still in school, and once you're out, some will allow you to adjust your payment schedule based on your income, so it never gets too onerous. If you end up working in certain fields like teaching or healthcare in underserved areas, your federal loans could be eligible for forgiveness.
The last type of aid is private student loans. They can seem attractive at first because you don't have to bother with the FAFSA, but you will have to show creditworthiness and ability to pay back the loan. Since this is tough for young folks, you might have to get a family member to co-sign for these. The terms and conditions are set by the lender rather than the government.
And interest rates are typically higher. Federal loans are currently offered around 4.5%, while the average private fixed rate loan starts around 6.17%. That might not sound like a huge spread, but with the average student debt load hovering around 31 grand and taking 21 years to pay off, those couple percentage points could mean $7,000 in interest alone. Some private student loans can go as high as 14%. Ugh, I'm too afraid to do the math on that one, but this is starting to feel more like fool's gold to me.
As you can see, there are a lot of different paths to tread when it comes to paying for college. And I think it's a pretty good parallel to life in general. Truly valuable things are usually hidden behind a lot of hard work and sacrifice, whereas easier paths come with a lot of strings attached.
But remember, even if you end up having to take out loans, it's not the end of the world. Any degree, even a 100% financed one, is better than none at all.
And that's our 2 cents.
Having a rough year.
Having a rough year.
You're out loud.
All right, so hopefully it came through okay on your end. And yeah, it's a little longer video, or it's like about 6 minutes, but maybe one you could use with your students because it covers some of the FAFSA basics, but also digs into brief information about some of the financial aid and loans and that information as well. And we do have these 2 cents videos in Edpuzzle. So any of you remote teachers or any of you that like Edpuzzle, I'm a huge Edpuzzle fan also, where questions are built in, those are all available too on the video library. So let me maximize this here a bit. I see we only have about 9 minutes, and I want to make sure that you have some time to ask me some questions as well if you have them. Here are a couple of Amanda's favorite financial aid activities, and I won't go over every single one, but again, this will send to you. Let me just get my screen right here. There we go. I like the cartoon activities where students analyze a cartoon and add some of the information to it. One in particular that I want to mention, these are all great activities and I've linked them for you, but we have a fine print activity where students analyze a financial aid package. And this one was just updated. So I like this one because it has them actually look at the financial aid offer and then dissect the loans, the grants, the net price, kind of put all of this together. So here's what it looks like, where here's an example of a financial aid offer letter. I know they say not to use letter, but financial aid offer, where we're seeing loan options, a work study option, a grant, and then a family financing option here. Then we also have another example, and then students answer some questions. So that's a great activity that allows students to dissect some of that information. And then I added a few others here as well. So the last little stage here, which I'm honestly going to zip through real quick, honestly, because of time, is that repayment stage. So we looked at preparation, FAFSA, we looked at the offer letter, which encompasses all of the ways to pay for college. And then the last little chunk here is then going to college and paying back any money that you may have borrowed. So this is just showing you some steps to loan repayment. Once a student graduates college, if they drop out, or they drop below part-time status, their student loans are going to enter repayment. And most student loans are going to have a 6-month grace period. When I say most, I mean those unsubsidized and subsidized direct loans. They have a period of time. They give you grace. You have that grace period where you don't have to make payments. And then a loan servicer will contact you to set up information, payments, all of that information. And then federal loans, what you're looking at here, and again, linked everything for you, federal loans have a little bit more options as far as repayment plans. So in today's webinar, we're not kind of digging into this very much, but knowing that there are a plethora of different repayment plans. And that's really that last stage of the financial aid process, that if a student does borrow money in student loans, federal loans have these different basic plans and income-driven plans to pay back the money that you have borrowed. One other, I guess, kind of big-ish current event on the premise of interest rates and repayment is that with the CARES Act, on March 27th, Congress passed CARES Act, and what happened is that all federal, I want to make sure I'm saying it, not private, federal student loans are currently paused. Any collections on defaulted loans has stopped, and the interest rate is set to 0% on federal loans due to the CARES Act, and then it was extended until the end of the year, December 31st. So the general, I see some of you like, yeah, the general interest rate on a direct subsidized and unsubsidized loan for this year is 2.75%, but due to the current pandemic and the CARES Act, all federal student loan payments are paused. The interest is not accruing, it's at 0%, and collections has stopped on any defaulted loans. And again, yes, Cindy, thanks for mentioning that in the chat. If you can still pay on your student loans, you should, yes, because if interest is paid up, your whole payment is going towards principal. So if you can financially afford to keep making payments, thanks for putting that up there, Cindy, because it's an important point to make, to continue making those payments as well if you can financially afford it. All right, I can't do, and I know I'm down to 4 minutes, I can't do a paying for college webinar without mentioning Payback. So Payback is an awesome game, timeforpayback.com. to use with your students as part of this conversation. Payback allows students to look at how much debt they might accrue given a bunch of choices that they make, but it allows them to try and balance their life as far as loans, their connections, their focus, all of these things while attending college. And NGPF currently has a payback challenge that is now open. I've linked all the details here, but your students can win some money. They can win up to $2,500 by responding to a small writing prompt and playing the payback simulation. So that's linked here. And if you have questions on it, I want to be mindful of your time, but I'll stick around that if you have questions related to it, I'll definitely answer them. Where can you find some more information? Well, we have a whole unit page on paying for college. We have a video library with some Edpuzzle videos built in. Payback is part of what's called our arcade. And then here's some upcoming PDs. So some of you may already be signed up, but if you're really interested, Tim is running a Payback arcade PD right after this, like in 3 minutes. So yep, next session, 7 p.m. Eastern time is Payback. If you want to maybe, oh, you're on your way. Okay, I'll get you out of here. Just a second. If you're interested, I'm running Brush Up on FAFSA on October 13th. I'm running a session on financial aid packages on October 26th. And then Sonia is running a PD on trade schools, apprenticeships. I saw a question pop up, I just couldn't address it, of what if I have the student who's not interested in going to college? Well, there's a PD on apprenticeships and trade schools and internships. This is a personal plug. I run the Paying for College certification course. So if you're interested in, hey, that hour went by fast, you didn't get into much detail. If you want a deep dive into paying for college or a deeper dive, I'm going to run a Paying for College in the next cohort. So you can check the certifications page to find some more information. All right, everybody. Thank you. That one went by fast for me. So I appreciate you sticking in there. Webinars are just kind of sit and get my scratchy kind of sick voice and just sticking with it. Let me put the survey in the chat for you here. If you have questions, I am happy to stick around and answer them. There's your survey right there. If you have questions here, I'll put my email up on the screen. Actually, you know what? It's amanda@ngpf.org. I'm actually going to just unshare my screen because it might be a little easier on your end and potentially on mine as well. So thank you so much for attending a webinar, Paying for College webinar. If you have questions, stick around. If not, if you're interested, Tim's running a payback session here in about a minute for some strategies to integrate payback with your students and more information on the scholarship opportunity. So here's the survey again. Thank you. I appreciate it. If you want more information, email me or stick around. Thank you.